Good morning, FBC family. This is my faith story. On the morning of my 27th birthday, while teaching a classroom full of students, I received the phone call that no one wants to get. My mother had died. It was 4 days before my first wedding anniversary, 6 weeks after I started my first full-time teaching position, 9 months after I'd moved halfway across the country to the deserts of Phoenix, Arizona, where I'd only been once before and knew no one. And it was only a year after my mother had been diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, better known as ALS. That day, if I'm honest, was not the start of a grief journey, but the culmination of a perfect storm of 100 big and small hardships. Financial struggles, physical issues, relational misunderstandings, rejection, disappointment, uprootedness, emotional upheaval. These all together produced a kind of soul trauma in me. I was in the desert literally, but I entered a spiritual desert, what Christians often call a crisis of faith or a dark night of the soul. As a pastor's daughter, I had tried hard to do all the right things growing up. Yet here I was, like Job. I felt betrayed by God, abandoned, stripped of what mattered most. And on top of all that, it seemed, and I'm not saying he did, but it seemed that God had left me too. I no longer sensed him when I tried to worship. I no longer felt his comfort when I prayed. How could a loving God do this to me? I'm certain that's how Mary and Martha must have felt in John chapter 11. They'd honored Jesus. They'd fed him, provided for him. But as these sisters wrapped their beloved brother's body in linen and placed him dead in a tomb, I'm certain they thought Jesus had abandoned and betrayed them too. Why hadn't he come? After we buried my mother, I went back to work. I got busy. Martha's kind of busy. What else could I do? I was only existing, though. I would put myself together on the outside, but inside I was angry, aching, and barely making it from day to day. It's humbling to say this, but I went on for years like that. It took years until my hunger and thirst for real spiritual answers grew to the point it would overtake my anger. It took years until I was so dehydrated spiritually, so hungry for God, that I was willing to lay down my belief God had betrayed me and choose to seek him again. It started with the concept of heaven. I read near-death experience books like Heaven is for Real by Todd Burpo and others. Then I began to bury myself in God's word. I pored over the Gospels, the book of Genesis, the Psalms. I began to discover at a deeper level who Jesus is, who he says he is. And I began to find answers to just a few of my why questions, which of course gave me a greater thirst to know him more. At this point, the best I can describe is his living water began to flow, drip by drip for a long time, because like the desert, I was incredibly dry. But each drop nourished me just enough. Each dribble of peace quenched me for just that day. I didn't feel spiritually full, but somehow I knew God was filling me. I didn't feel very close to him, but I began to accept that he was still near. Through that time, I also began to write. I felt this burden at the core of me that I needed to record what God was showing me through his word, which I've spent time doing over the past 3 years, and have now begun to share, as many of you know. Has God answered all my questions in this journey? No, but he continues to draw me toward answers. Do I feel his presence with me every moment? No. But beyond my fickle feelings, I've learned he is present. His grace is sufficient. He is loving and faithful and working in ways that I can and cannot see. He's authored my faith, and he's been perfecting that faith, a much deeper faith than I ever would have had if my mother hadn't died. Am I grateful for the journey I've walked? Honestly, not yet, but I can see fruit coming from it. I can see drops of that living water God keeps pouring into me, seeping out like through a cracked vase for others who are also thirsty. And for that, I am grateful.